Welcome to Coffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person.
Dan, I'm sick and tired of it. I'm going to tell you straight up right now. I'm absolutely sick and tired of the arguing and the bullying, okay? You know, we talked earlier and it's like so what did I say to you? I said, we have these podcasts and I noticed the one that I was watching today or whatever, you just posted it, and it didn't introduce us anymore. There was no more, David Person, the owner of the most complete Pokemon collection, English language in the world, and no more Dan, the guy with all the knowledge behind the cards. It was all put away. And I was frustrated because I'm thinking, what do these people think they're watching now? Who are they watching? They're watching some old guy and a guy with green hair. Why is anybody going to watch that? What do we know? So our credentials are gone. And I say, Dan, where did they go? And you say, David, you should realize, you told me that people only have an 8-second attention span. And so you should realize that nobody wants to watch us with a longer intro. And I said, it's 10 seconds, Dan. It isn't that long to tell them who we are. And you said you polled the public, you polled our audience, and they said, the intros are too long, throw them away, I'm done. So Dan, then we talked about all this other stuff about should we put a little snippet of the podcast in the beginning and all the rest of it. But I feel like you're limiting me, Dan, and I don't understand why, and I'm getting fed up with it, okay? I don't do this for my own, good graces, right? I've been admitted into heaven already. In fact, they want to take me very soon. So Dan, what's going on? What's up with the arguing and bullying, and why can I never get you to say, David, you can win this one?
Well, the big thing I said was, it's not just a case of it's 10 seconds. YouTube, everything that's behind the scenes at YouTube, they show that people will decide in the first 30 seconds of a video if they're going to keep watching. 30 seconds is the biggest turn-off time for videos. So it's not just a case of it's 10 more seconds. It's whether the intro is 10 seconds or 20 seconds. So it's whether it takes up a third of that decision time or 2/3 of that decision time, which is a much, much bigger jump. Which is why I said, if you wanted to bring back the intro with the credentials, what we should do is have a 30-second to a minute introduction clip first, introduce what we're going to talk about for the day, then put the longer 20-second introduction so that people have a bit of a grasp of what's going to be happening in the podcast before we get to the intro.
So that's like a show that we watch at my house, Dan, called SWAT. And it's a very nice show. It's a very good police show. Hopefully many of you watch it. And so what they do is they give all the big, the controversy and the fighting, and here's what's going on and the tension. And then it cuts, and then they do the well-recognized SWAT music that everybody listens to, go to commercial, and then they come back. Is that what we need to do, Dan? Do we need to?
Yeah, like a cold open.
Power it up in the beginning?
Yeah, cold open.
A cold open, okay. And Dan, do people care who we are? Like, I'm really asking this seriously. So there's these guys and these other social media guys, and one comes on and he throws a chair, and one comes on and he brings up a plunger for a toilet seat, and everybody's got their spiel. Should I be even more wacky than I am? Like, should I let people see the other side of me completely just to try to say, oh, it's that crazy maniac again? Hopefully Dan can calm him down today.
No, you're wacky enough. And I think people appreciate that we are relatively calm. And I think they appreciate that we focus more on information, telling stories, rather than the, being wacky and crazy for views. It's like the thing I said good few episodes ago now. I would rather get a lower amount of views on something I'm proud of making than feel like I'm making something I hate just to get more views.
Well, Dan, you're doing a great job of getting a mediocre number of views, okay? So I think whatever you want to do, you're right on track for that. And what I'm going to say about that is we posted a video today, and today was the video that had to do with those Danish authenticated, CGC authenticated trophy cards that aren't trophy cards. Yep. And we've got a lot of traction with that today as far as the views and stuff. But more importantly, so obviously I'm teasing when I say, hey guys, you guys should know, if you ever watch the intros, by the way, like the last one that was a couple days ago that was like 2 minutes long when I spieled, it's all a joke. I have nothing I say that's ever serious. So please figure that out. If you're new to the podcast, get it that I take everything with a sense of irreverence, and that's how it is. But we did, through our podcast, make contact with the golden people, and we had those auctions removed, which is pretty darn impressive. And so I attribute a lot of that success to Dan and his contributions. And, we always talk about it. We talk about what we think is okay and not okay, and when something gets graded or not, and when something is put up for auction or not. It's misportrayed, or we use the word deceptive, Dan used in the last video. So I was proud of that. I was proud of our ability to help, police the hobby a little bit when we know something is wrong. Dan put in one of his posts that I was willing to call out the cards that I even have as my own set, because I said they shouldn't be graded. So Dan, your thoughts just on the fact that that we did a piece that was very objective, not subjective, and it actually had some impact.
Yeah, I mean, people might pull it up as saying, "Hey, those auctions were pulled before your video even went live," but it was after we'd recorded it. There, while I was in the editing process, there was a lot of talk behind the scenes with David and some golden people and some other stuff going on, which is how it ended up getting pulled down. It was actually, I noticed as I was in the editing for the video and I was finalizing the images, I saw that they've been pulled. What's happened is they're still technically live on the golden website, but you can't search for them anymore. And they have like the start of bidding date set to, I think it's like December 31st, 2049 or something. So they're still technically there as placeholders, but they're not live for auction. You can't bid on them anymore, which is great.
And most of these auction companies, I'm not too familiar really. I've never auctioned things specifically myself, but they typically have a subject matter representative. So you've got kind of a Pokemon expert that helps facilitate the handling of Pokemon items in particular auctions. And so they are certainly well aware when something goes like the playtest situation of how much controversy can be caused and how much damage can be caused reputationally if it tracks back, whether or not it's coming from them or they blame CGC. They're still in that chain, right, where they have the ability to potentially stop it in its tracks. We don't know if they'll ever, they could bring it back and then something else could happen differently. But with that sense of misrepresentation, hopefully they do the right thing, understand the brand reputation, and understand you don't want to be subject to the media and this kind of stuff. And they actually do not put them back because, as we stated, really they shouldn't have been graded in the first place. So they're just continuing to permeate a false narrative that really shouldn't exist. Okay, I'm going to say right now, it's amazing. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. I know why they watch you. I don't know why they continue to watch with me on the podcast. But my friend, it has come to my attention that you have passed 8,000 subscribers, which is
Yeah.
just amazing, wonderful. Congratulations. I know you're very happy about it. I know that it's just stepping stones and our next goal is 10 or whatever, but we take the little wins along the way.
Yeah,
Dan,
definitely.
what do you attribute the success to, honestly? When you think, hey, I know you did a social media post on Instagram or Facebook or whatever you posted on a few days ago and said we were like 7,600 on I'm not on your YouTube subscriber channel at DJGigabyte. I should announce that because no one knows what it is. They're
It's
watching it
just,
on there now,
yeah,
David. Okay, I know it never
yeah.
gets old. So, what do you attribute it to, Dan? What's going right for you, now more so than ever?
Well, I think the consistency is really helping. The fact that we're doing either these videos or some video almost every day, I think the consistency is really helping a lot more people find the channel. Plus, like I talked about, I was using those promoted posts a lot more actually within YouTube, where you can push your video to someone as an advert. I think those are doing pretty well. I think a lot of the subscribers are coming from there. So just riding that wave and keeping that going.
And I talked earlier about the, who social media influencers are. There are people that have huge businesses, there are people that are just starting out, maybe have a niche. Some people just start talking and that's great, more power to them. But does anybody care about credentials, Dan? I mean, honestly, from your perspective, the when somebody gets on and they're throwing chairs or they're, pulling out their hair, you know, do you as a millennial, because I'm not a millennial, you're not even a millennial, you're older than you're older than a millennial. So,
No, I'm not.
but do
I'm a
you think the
millennial.
younger folks, what are you?
I'm definitely a millennial. Millennial started about 1985.
All right, but Dan, maturity wise, you're not a millennial. You're way past that now. Sorry to all our millennial audience. Things, no defamation intended. Do they care? Do you guys watching care honestly? So give us a comment and tell me. Like, I like to know who I'm watching from the standpoint of whether or not they're actually know what they're talking about. So do you just figure that out by the first 5 minutes of watching, or do you actually want to know their credentials behind it and whether or not they ought to have some knowledge as they go into the video?
I mean, I hope they don't work it out from the first 5 minutes of watching, because it takes you 5 minutes to say anything.
I'm not talking about our videos. I'm talking about somebody else's.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the big thing with credentials is Pokemon definitely pays attention to credentials when they're deciding who gets the media passes for Worlds. They definitely just look at the numbers, because I know how quickly they rejected me this year, and there's no way they had time to watch any content. They just clicked the links and looked at my subscriber numbers and my Instagram followers.
Well, the good news at least is you'll be there. And apparently, if I go there, I'm going to be sitting out in the lobby, sipping a tremendous number of Mai Tais, margaritas, or any other liquor drink that starts with M, and waiting for people to come and say hello because I won't be allowed inside the venue. Dan, let's move on to the topic of the day. We're going to need to brighten this whole thing up now. I've done too much fighting and too much arguing, and we took too much credit for the removal of things. So we're going to talk about Professor promo sets today. And I'm aware of two of them, but you may want to embellish that for a myriad of reasons. And I'm also aware that these sets, in my mind, as you begin to discuss them, are seemingly very unpublicized. So when I think of virtually anything that is even limited in quantity given out in the hobby for whatever reason, it seems to me that it can be found somewhere on a sales or auction site at some point in time. And I'm not saying these aren't and can't, but to my knowledge, it seems like these are very infrequently found anywhere. And I'm going to talk more about that, but you need to verify what I'm saying in the beginning and describe what we're talking about, and we'll go from there.
Well, I should say, when you're talking about professor promo sets, referring specifically to the plaques that some professors get each year for contribution to the professor community, which contain 8 full art supporters. There's a lot of different professor promos, a lot of different professor promo sets that have been released over the years. I think the first cards with an actual professor program logo on started in about 2005, 2006. There's been a ton of them over the years, but the ones you're specifically referring to are the ones just from the last couple of years. So
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. So the first ones were given out. I think it was around December 2022, and those ones were for contributions in 2021. So they were given out for the previous year. I think they would have gone out earlier in 2022, but obviously we were still in pandemic times. A lot more stuff was delayed, so there was a bit of a delay getting those out to people. And then in 2023, people were given them for contributions in 2022, and then we've just had people now get their plaques for contributions in 2024.
What happens when we do this is you know everything about this, but the audience doesn't necessarily. So if you
Okay.
can take just a pause every once in a while, I'm going to allow the audience to catch up. So let's go back to the beginning. What we're saying is the very first one, which is 8 cards on a plaque. I want you to describe what it looks like. I know you'll have pictures, but I want you to talk about for contributions. What does it look like and what are they given out for? And we're just going to deal with the first one right now.
Okay, so yeah, the first one, it looks basically, if you open the binder, a 9-card layout, a 3x3 grid. Around the outside, there are 8 different full art supporters. Each of these have the Professor Program logo on. I'll go into exactly which cards they are in a little bit, but I'll say that it's the 8 gym leaders from Galar in the first one. And then the center square has a little write-up with the professor's name, and it says something along the lines of awarded to the professor's name for outstanding contribution to the Professor Program in 2021.
So what would that be, Dan? I mean, it's just the idea that these folks are attending events or they're assisting or they've been recognized, just because maybe it's because they really haven't been recognized for anything and this is just a way to recognize them. Is it a tenure with the company? How do you perceive the folks that are actually getting these?
Well, I know for the first year it was very heavily people who had either created something or were kind of like the heads of programs, or they were the people pushing for some sort of change. So I know that people who'd created tournament software, like Carlos and Dana Perro, who had created Arcanine, which is the software that all Pokemon tournaments now run on, they got them for the first year because it was a huge contribution. It was a huge change and really improved the way tournaments were run. Yves Roundtree was another professor who got them. He oversaw a ton of stuff in Latin America. I think he was pretty influential and pretty key to growing Latin America as a whole during the last few years, just when it was going from a much smaller, kind of ignored part of the Pokemon community to making it a lot bigger and making it have a much bigger impact.
All right. And then what you've told me is that over the course of 2 or 3 years, they use these same cards, but each year recognize some different people. So,
Yeah.
roughly how many folks from that first set of 8 cards over a 3-year period, let's call it 20, 22, 23, 24, so, or maybe 21, 22, 23, how many people do you think received that plaque with those cards on it?
Yeah, so they were handed out in 22, 23, 24, and it was for contributions in 21, 22, 23. I don't know the exact number. My estimate would be somewhere between 20 and 30 copies total. I believe the first year was 6, and similar, maybe slightly more over the next couple of years, but between 20 and 30 would be the best guess that I can put out there.
Okay. And Dan, I'm going to just I know there's no reason for me to think that I would know more than you, just because of your immersion in the hobby more so than I. But certainly, as looking for these cards and looking for these sets, and we're going to talk about people coming to me at times to potentially be, interested in selling me the cards. I don't think there's as many as that, Dan. So I'm just going to put it out there. I believe more like the numbers are probably 15 to 20 as opposed to more. I don't know that, but I just have a gut feeling based on how few are seen out in the wild. And I know one could argue that's because the judges don't want to give them, the professors don't want to give them up. But we both admit we don't know. So if it's between 15 and 30, we're giving a range in there somewhere.
Yeah, and I think for a product like this, or an item like this, sorry, if they don't want to sell it, like if they're not actively trying to sell it, this is the kind of thing that a lot of people would keep secret if they got one. I know some of them have allowed TPCI to use them as kind of a marketing tool to show them off the fact that they got them. Some people have shared them publicly, even when wanting to keep them. But I think after the first year, I think it kind of got around just how many people were, you know, emailing them, sending messages, trying to get in contact with them, saying, I want to buy this. It's the same, it's pretty similar to those Mentor Voltorbs from 151, that we've spoken about before, the Cosmos reverse ones. I've helped a few judges, or a few mentors, I should say, sell those privately because they don't want the hassle of going public and saying, I have one of these. Because when they first got revealed, I think it was Pokey Beach again, posted someone's name who had one without checking with the person if it was okay. And they said they got hundreds of messages that same day through Facebook, through emails, everywhere, just bombarding them, people saying, I want to buy this, I want to buy this, I want to buy this. So this is that similar kind of product where if you're not actively trying to sell it, it's really in your benefit to kind of keep it secret, or just let some, close friends or your personal Facebook know that you have it and not let it be known publicly that it's something you have.
Okay. And so that makes complete and utter sense. I will still create the contradictory argument that if I were to be honored enough to receive something like this as a professor, I would want to shout it to the mountaintops that they gave this award to me because of its uniqueness and because of its rarity and because of the contribution I was honored for. So, I guess it's easy for me to say because I'm not getting bombarded, but I mean, I don't know that that's just a reason, because some of these people that think, hey, they're never going to sell it or whatever, or maybe they want to entertain a value, but if they think they're never going to sell it, it's just nice to put it out there and say, hey, I got this. Like, people like to be recognized for their accomplishments. So
Well, I believe the first year that they did them, all 6 people who got them did. They all posted publicly and talked about it. And then if it was, I think the stories got around of just how much harassment they were getting, that in future years, it's caused people to be a lot more private about it. I mean, people in the professor community know who's got them for the most part. They'll talk about it in like the professor Discord or something, where they'll say, hey, look, I'm one of the ones who got this, and all the professors will congratulate each other and talk about it in there. It's just letting it know to the general public they've been much less likely to do for future years just because of not wanting harassment about it. I mean, even if they put up and say, I have zero interest in selling, they're going to get hundreds of messages anyway. I mean, the amount of
yeah.
messages I still get, because I think probably about over 10 years ago at this point, put up a video about Your English Versus set where I talked about how we first discovered that there was 2 versions of that Mantine. I still get messages now of people saying, hey, I need to talk to your friend. I have to make him an offer. I know he'll sell to me. I can make him a good offer. And when I say no, people get annoyed. I've had people say, oh, you don't have the authority to say that your friend's not selling it. It needs to be him. You don't know my clients. My clients make these good offers. And I still get that now from, like I say, an over 10-year-old video.
Dan, you don't have the authority, so I don't know what the heck you think you're doing. You need to stop. But on a different note, so we can move back to this, I do want to say it's interesting. Do you have any? I know you don't. So just speculate here. I know we don't know anything about this. We've been on a podcast with somebody who actually said to us a while back, "I've not been awarded that plaque." And that kind of gets me a little bit like, how do I get awarded that plaque? Because I certainly think I'm deserving of that plaque. And so when I say that to you, it makes me think of a jealousy, right? Like I don't know how many professors are involved in a strong enough situation with the hobby that they would be eligible, whatever that means, that their contributions are sufficient, whatever that means. But do you get any notion of they're just there could be politics or just some people that have not been awarded and they're out there and feeling pretty left out because they feel like, gosh, why did all these other people get it?
I think it does come down to the fact that it's specifically for outstanding contribution in a certain year. So there will be professors and people who have, made contributions over a long-term period. People who've been making contributions since the WotC era maybe wouldn't be recognized with this type of thing because, they're just continuing on as they always have. But if they're looking at a specific year, they will go like, oh, this person did something incredible during this year. So that's the kind of people that they're picking. And there are other professors, the people who are making these other contributions ongoing, they do get other kinds of awards. They do get other cards and stuff that they're able to get that not all professors get. Just these specific plaques seem to be focused in on what did people do in this specific year.
I understand. Okay. So Dan, talk about, you said that, so we've determined that there were 8 cards that were in the first set of plaques that are issued. I know what I wanted to ask you. One last question. Are you aware, and I know we're early in the second plaque release time frame. This year is just the first year of it.
Yeah.
But are you aware of in the first release of this second round that anybody's actually been given something a second time?
I
Do you
don't believe
understand what
so.
I'm asking?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't think anyone no. I'm almost certain no one got the same one twice for 2 different years in the first run, and I don't think anyone who got the second one had also got the first one.
Okay. If you
I
ever
would
hear
be
that, it'd
very
be interesting
surprised
to
if
know
they
that
did.
there was. Yeah. Okay. So will you tell us about the 8 cards from the first one, Dan?
So 8 cards from the first one. We have from Rebel Clash, we have Milo, Darkness Ablaze, Kabu and Piers, Vivid Voltage, B, Nessa and Opal, Chilling Rain, Melanie, and from Evolving Skies, Raihan. So these are, as I
And
said,
so,
they're the
Dan, those
full.
cards are exactly what you would find in the actual sets that you said, except they have that professor stamp on them, correct?
Correct, but they're not the regular versions of the cards. They're the full art versions. So they're the kind of secret rare versions. The higher numbered ones at the end of the set. So normally when stuff gets promo versions, it's normally the regular versions, but these are the full art versions. It's very, very rare that full art versions of cards ever get variants, and I can't even really think of any others that have. Even when it's prize packs and stuff, it's always the regular version of the VMAX that get them, but they wanted to make this obviously really special. And those 8 characters are the 8 gym leaders from Galar. So the Sword and Shield video games, those are the 8 gym leaders you have to defeat to get your badges to go on to fight the league. So it's really symbolic of that's why they picked the 8 of them.
And then, Dan, now they have retired those characters and those
Yeah.
plaques with those cards, and we have now moved to another set, the second year of not the second year, but the second offering of new plaques with new cards.
Yeah.
Can you describe the 8 cards in the new plaques?
Yes, so in the new plaques we have from the Scarlet Violet base set, we have Katie from Paldea Evolved, Grusha and Iono, from Obsidian Flames, Rhyme, from Paradox Rift, Larry and Tulip, from Stellar Crown, Kofu, and from Prismatic Evolution's Brassius. So again, those characters are 8 gym leaders. Again, they're the full art versions of these characters, and it's the 8 gym leaders from the Paldea region, which is where you go in the Scarlet Violet video games. Scarlet Violet obviously being the era that we're currently in.
So Dan, two things. One is prismatic evolutions. Anytime you say that, I get a little ting. The dopamine starts flowing through my brain. So I'm really excited to see that one in the photos that you post. But also, when you say the gym leaders from Scarlet and Violet, the gym leaders from Sword and Shield, I always feel like you're saying there were just 8 of them. Are there more than 8 in those eras, but these are just 8 of them, or were there just 8 and that's it?
So I believe in the Sword and Shield era, there was a thing of some gyms had major leaders and minor leaders. I didn't actually play the games, but they picked the major ones, I believe, when they had that option. But from Scarlet Violet, it was just those 8.
Okay. All right. That's fantastic. So from a master set perspective, as we build my sets, we are taking those cards and we are tucking them inside. Like you said, oh, this one's from Evolving Skies.
Yeah.
Somewhere in my Evolving Skies set, I'm going to see the regular card in the regular set, and I'm going to see the variant in the back with the professor stamp on it, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And you're all for that, right? Because since these are truly variants, they don't necessarily, in your mind, belong together in a special place.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if I was a professor and I was personally awarded one, I would be keeping it together as the 8, because it would be in the plaque with my name on it. But the people that have sold these, obviously, they haven't sold the plaque. They've kept the empty plaque that has their name in the middle. They probably put 8 cards that they like around it. Maybe they just got the 8 regular full arts, without the professor logos. Like, that would be something if I was selling my set, that's what I'd do, is just put the regular ones in there. But because it's not really a set out once it's outside of the plaque. It has the history and stuff behind it, but I'm definitely in favor of you putting it into your regular sets the way that you do.
Dan, have you seen, just curiosity, and I really don't scan things that much, especially, it's so funny when I think about my history with the hobby. And I did this not because I had money, folks, so I'm not trying to say I had money or have money. It's just what I did. I was looking for more rare items. So I would sit in my bed at night and I would have the eBay on and I would sort by highest, item value first and scroll down to see the more unique items that were out there, thinking that the ones that were more expensive would be the ones that potentially would be more unique. So I don't do that anymore. I don't scan the listings at all. It's, Dan might tell me, hey, we need these cards or whatever, go look for these, but that's about it. So Dan, to your knowledge, have you ever seen a set of these publicly for sale on Facebook, eBay, somewhere else at all?
No, and in my opinion, it'd be a very bad idea to try and do that
Okay,
because
wait, don't. Okay, don't, because
okay,
I want to talk about this. Can I have this
all right,
piece?
go ahead.
Because I give you the rest. I just want a piece. So what Dan's going to say is we're going to talk about the the optics, the bad potential optics of somebody out there selling a set that was essentially gifted to them by the Pokemon company or whatever. And I wasn't necessarily referring to that when I just gave him that question, because it could be obviously a middle person who didn't identify where they came from at all. And they just actually got the set from a professor and put them out either on their own or for the professor on some kind of retail online outlet. But I do want to mention that what I was going to talk about in this video was the ethical dilemma that professors have when it comes to selling these sets and the cards from these sets. And that's why the plaques never, in my opinion, all of these are my opinion because I never claim to know anything. But in my opinion, that's why the plaques don't get sold, because the plaques are the one way to identify where the cards actually came from, which professor they came from. But the cards can be extracted from the plaques and they can be sold. And I've had people come to me, judges come to me in the past and offer their cards. And I have a binding agreement with them because I value them and I value their confidentiality. And I appreciate the fact that they would be willing to sell their cards to me for the collection, where I will not identify who they are. and they trust me in that because I never have, and I never will. So if you have a confidential way to do that and not breach the agreement you have and disclosure of a professor's identity, um, I am of the opinion that it is 100% okay to sell these, and not for selfish reasons for me, but for them. These sets are not inexpensive, guys. Dan will tell you that we've had people come to me with sets and say, gosh, I want, I'll let Dan, I don't even know. Dan, can I say any numbers or anything?
I'll say at one point someone,
I'm just saying what people have asked me for sets.
yes, for the new one, someone approached me trying to middleman for a friend, and they wanted $400,000 because they wanted $50,000 per card.
So there's an example. We've certainly seen people have come to us, wanting 50,000, for the set. So I won't at this point get into what I paid for last year's set, but they are rare, and I know how rare they are, and I'm always so grateful to be able to acquire them from a professor who's willing to sell them. And I appreciate that I can also assist the professor in acquiring, many thousands of dollars for whatever they want to use it for. If this is the way that the company honors them and awards them, I'm okay with that. I think that should be fine. They're their cards, just like I always think they should be able to do whatever they want with them. Now, obviously, you've got many social media folks that say, you have an uncut sheet, you cut it, how dare you, you've breached the history of the hobby. People are going to judge everybody for everything, and that's fine. I just don't judge, and I don't care to get into that. You got to stay in your own lane sometimes, and if you own it, and I always say, if it's not something that's illegal, if you're abiding by the law in what you're doing, then to me it's absolutely fine, and I'm okay with the ethics of a professor saying, I would like to get rid of these cards. I'm really appreciative of them, but I've got to, I want to put an addition on the house, or I want to buy a new car for the son, and I need to do whatever. So, Dan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Pokemon is never going to be upset at any professor who sells them. Pokemon aren't putting a stipulation on this of you're not allowed to sell it. It's just kind of the professors that I know who've spoken about this have said they're more worried about the idea that they would seem ungrateful, and if they seem ungrateful, maybe Pokemon remembers that next time they're doing something special. Not necessarily another plaque, because like we said, we don't believe anyone's had 2 plaques, even if they're different ones, but whatever the next special thing is, maybe they think, oh, Pokemon's going to remember, well, they didn't really appreciate it when they got the plaque, they just sold it, so maybe they get passed over for that. And I think that's what professors are worried about, or even potentially being passed over for higher ranking jobs at Worlds or anything like that. I don't think it's a thing that Pokemon would do, but I can understand why professors, given the option, would just say, hey, I'd rather not. I'd rather it be kept secret just in case. There's nothing really. It doesn't cost the professor anything to say, please keep it secret. The other reason I would always say I don't think anyone should ever be selling these publicly is if you post it on a Facebook group and you say, I want X amount of money, firm price, I'm not lowering our price, tell me, like, if you want to buy it, tell me, you'll get a ton of messages, and 99.9% of those messages will be people who aren't going to buy it, could never buy it, can't afford it. It would be people asking you to split the set. It would be people trying to trade their sealed 151 bundles or something for it. You would just be, again, completely inundated with messages that are so irrelevant and so difficult to get through. And the thing is, one thing that is always talked about a lot is cards that are just cards with a stamp. None of this isn't a stamp, it's printed on the card and it is very rare, but this isn't exclusive artwork. The market for cards that aren't exclusive artwork is a lot lower. So this is still a pretty niche item. Even though there's only, even if you say 15 to 20 copies out there, there's not a huge amount of people who will pay that huge asking price for it. If we're talking like, for example, if we say like the professors, no professor's going to go lower than if they say 15 or whatever. If that's every professor's lowest price, you'd still be hard pressed to find 15 people willing to pay 15,000 for a copy of these, or 20 people willing to pay 15,000 for these, because it's niche enough where a lot of the people who have that amount of money to spend on Pokemon cards are going to be looking elsewhere. And so obviously it does come down to, how many of the professors who received it actually do want to sell. That's always a factor. But because the amount of buyers is so small and it's so, like I say, a niche item, it is so much better to just go privately, try and get into that network of people directly that are actually going to be interested. So, like, I had some people come, like, say someone came to me about this most recent one to get a message to you. People have come to you directly. They know that you're one of the few actual potential buyers who would be willing to meet the actual price that they're asking for. So it's just easier on everyone to actually do it that way.
And this goes back to our conversations, which we have a lot of the time on supply and demand, right? So the supply of these is very, very low. I mean, if you think about all the cards we go back to in history, we talk about Stadium, Challenge, Deoxys, and all crazy low amounts of cards. And back then, of course, there was more demand. It was cheaper and it was vintage, and people really didn't know what was going on. But these days, you can quantify to some degree how limited it is. But if you do not have the demand, then the prices will not get up to where they need to be. And who would be the collectors of these? Well, master set collectors like me, someone that wants to fill in the last cards that are going to be listed in Bulbapedia at some point, indicating that your set is really not complete. Anybody that collects professor cards in the sense of professor stamps or professor cards all the way through another kind of collection. Could be a character collector in one of these, whatever you call them, gym leaders. So I have no idea what you said, but something like that where, again, you need characters, and that would necessitate somebody actually splitting the setup. And I'm not aware of that ever being done as of yet. Again, that could be at some point, but I don't think most professors that would want to sell would not necessarily want to take on the risk of splitting the set and get a card or two sold and then be stuck with the rest. So it is very limited at the moment demand wise, and so we have to wonder if in the future years. And this was what we thought about with the trophy cards. And trophy cards are not these cards. I understand. I'm not trying to compare and contrast. I'm just saying when we started buying trophy cards back in the beginning, 2004, 5, 6, 7, whatever, again, absolutely no demand and no supply. So that's why we could acquire them. And then as we've gone on more and more, and of course, these are trophy cards, they have a natural, inherent, more direct level of demand. But they've, what's happened is people understand how few and far between they are. That's actually led to some more demand, as well as them being trophy cards. And maybe with the continued growth of the hobby, what you'll see is that folks will realize these are very limited in quantity. And that's kind of the information we were trying to enlighten the audience with today. And they will start to look for these and think these are pretty cool item to be able to put aside, whether or not you collect or invest for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Because if they continue to do this every 2 or 3 years, it would be somebody says, I want to put together these sets. It's not going to be a cheap thing to do necessarily in the future.
Yeah, and when you say if they continue to do this, the Paldea one will continue for at least a couple of years. So the thing was, we went over obviously into the Scarlet Violet sets early 2023. So we still had the people who got their rewards from 2023 still had the older one. And we've only just now gone to this new one, and it's because they were waiting for all 8 gym leaders to get their full art version. And it was only when we got to Prismatic that Brassius finally got the full art version. So that's what they were waiting on. And if we are going to a new generation, even if we go to a new generation, they have to wait for all 8 gym leaders to get their full art versions before they can switch over. So this second plaque we'll see for at least a couple of years, at least 2 or 3 years.
You said Prismatic again, that Brassius thing, and I got another shot of dopamine, Dan. So I love you to death for doing that. Dan, I have one last question before we close up today. At least I'm going to close up. I don't think you would know this, but I love when you speculate and you're 100% wrong. That's what makes this podcast fun for me. The level of errors, that you make. So Dan, how many professors are there? Okay. I know that's a blanket statement. I know you don't know the answer, but thinking about whatever, I don't even know what a professor does or is, but if you had to just guess in the professor population, they've earned a designation, they've done some classes, They're out and about, and wherever professors need to do something at regionals or nationals or whatever they do, worlds. How many professors do you think there are, if you had to guess roughly?
Worldwide, maybe like 5 to 10,000.
Oh, so 5 to 10,000. So there's quite a few.
Yeah, like basically every local store you go to is going to have at least 2 or 3 professors there, even if they're not professors that ever do anything more than run their local league challenge. They're still professors. There's different stages of professor, so you can get, with both professor and organizer, you can get basic, stage 1, stage 2, and you can take on extra responsibilities based on those levels that you're in. But yeah, there's thousands of professors worldwide.
Okay, good. That's good to know. I wouldn't have had any idea. I would not have thought the number was that large. So, Dan, I'm done. Would you like to say anything before we close up? Because every time we try to do this in 12 minutes, we're at 42. So my apologies to the audience. I try to ask the questions that need to be asked. I try not to let Dan off the hook. And invariably, that means a long video. And if you don't like it, please keep watching. We have nothing better to do with our time, nor should you. You do, actually. We appreciate you. Dan appreciates you. Upwards and onwards and past 8,000 subs. And we love our audience. And thank you guys for being loyal contributors to the cause. Dan?
Yep, nothing else for me to say on my end. Obviously, as people will have seen, this video did just have that standard shorter intro. Maybe the intro will change going forward when me and Dave can come to an agreement. But until then, we will see you guys tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Coffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person, with music by More Than Never and artwork by Lore Norton. A special thanks to all our Patreon members. Join us again next time.
But they don't want you to.